Hey, Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
So I've got to tell the audience and everyone around me that how we actually got to meet. Kasim is a good friend of mine. He actually is I think he says the number 2, but I think he's being coy, Google specialist in the planet for advertising and marketing. Through him, I got to meet you, and you actually came to a dinner party of ours in Arizona, like about a month ago. That's how we first met, correct?
That's right.
So,
that's right.
And you had the misfortune of actually sitting next to me for that entire evening while we drank and told both bad jokes. But I got to know you, and I got to know that this spunky, creative, sarcastic, fun-loving girl has a serious side. And you started to talk to me about mental health problems. And this is what kind of drew me to you. Now, it doesn't sound like the best dinner time conversation to have, but you recognize something in all entrepreneurs, because let's be serious, you're in an entrepreneurial family. And we got to talk about this, and you actually wrote a book, and I've got to get it right, Postpartum Me, I love this, a fickle woman's spiral into postpartum depression and anxiety, and more importantly, how you can find your way out of it. Now, that doesn't sound like the most thrilling conversation, but as entrepreneurs, we quite often don't recognize the problems that we have, or that keyword, the spiral that we're in.
Right.
How did you realize that there was a problem, and what did you do about finding your way out of it?
So I had postpartum depression after my first child, and I had never been depressed before. I never dealt with any mental health issues before. So I didn't know how to recognize it. And because it was my first time as a mother too, I just correlated the two. So because it was my first time as a mother, and then all the emotions that came with it, I just thought that that's what it meant to be a mother. And I thought, well, this just sucks. I didn't realize it was a mental health issue. So I suffered for months and months without even knowing that there was a problem to address, which is a huge problem. It's one of the reasons I talk about this, because you can experience this and not know that that's what it is. So it's really important to recognize that that's what it is. And then the biggest thing is actually talking about it, because we spend so much time, saying like, oh, we're living the dream and we're fine and we're good. And if I ran into you at the store, I'd be like, hey, Steve, how are you? And you'd be like, hey, I'm doing really great. And because that's the script that everybody runs, but maybe you're not doing great, but we can't tell people that. And so I spent so much time just trying to keep it all together, trying to be this goddess of a mother that all moms are supposed to be. And we're supposed to just understand naturally how to take care of our children. And because I didn't understand how to take care of my child, I felt really ashamed of the way I was feeling. So that shame and that guilt and all of that stuff makes you not want to talk about it. So once I started talking about it, somebody in my life who was a therapist happened to say, hey, do you think maybe you are dealing with postpartum depression? And I was I felt like I got slapped in the face, because it just never occurred to me. Those words never ran across my brain the entire time. So once I heard that, I started to dive into it a little more and realize, you know what, I think I actually might have a problem here.
Because you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And most people don't know what it's like to have your first child until you have your first child. So you're having this situation. You're basically pooing a melon. You're now a mum, and you're supposed to, oh, well, this must be what it's like. And you're speaking very openly about mental health problems. I'm going to ask you quite bluntly, and it's a baited question. How embarrassed were you to suddenly start recognizing it as a mental health issue? Because a lot of people, because entrepreneurs, let's be serious, we can conquer everything. Right. We're in control of everything,
right,
until we're not. And then we do have the issue, our issue of being embarrassed about it. Did you carry an embarrassment when you suddenly started realizing what it was, or were you relieved?
Well, firstly, when I found out that that's what it was, I actually got more depressed, because I was depressed that I was depressed. And I was like, well, this fucking sucks. What do I do with it?
Wow.
Yeah, it really pissed me off, because I had a baby and I never had to deal with this before. And I was like, what the fuck do I do with this? Like, I was actually really, really angry that this was an issue. So first I had to figure that out. But then for me, it was more like I didn't like if I ever said those words out loud, like, oh, I'm dealing with postpartum depression, I kind of felt like a little bitch. And the reason I felt that way is because I have a really good life. Qasim is, my husband is amazing. And he was able to, he runs such a successful company. I was home with the baby. We live in Scottsdale. It's a resort town. We're safe. My kid was healthy. My parents are immigrants from a really shitty part of the world. It's a beautiful part, but it's not safe. And so I know what it's like to live in a place where, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for the things that I have. So when I was dealing with all of that, I kind of would have internal struggles where I'm like, stop being a baby. You're fine. You know what I mean? And so to say like, oh, I'm depressed, there's such a stigma behind it. And it just, sometimes you can just sound like a little bitch. And so it was hard for me to say those words because I didn't want to sound like I was complaining or ungrateful or whatever it is, when really I was struggling with like a legit chemical issue.
What was the turning point? What was the turning point for you to suddenly realize, hang on a minute? Because usually entrepreneurs react to aggravation. So it surprises me that you went from depression to more depression.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that you were angry about it, because that's usually the catalyst of all entrepreneurs doing something about it. We get angry about something and we fix that shit. So what was the turning point that you went from that kind of depression to anger to hang on a minute? What was that like?
So the problem is my depression was accompanied by anxiety. And I don't know if you've ever experienced anxiety, but it can paralyze you. And you literally can't move. So physically, mentally, you just are paralyzed. So I was like, oh no, I have this thing and I have to do something about it. I don't know what. And you can't make decisions when and plus I'm sleep deprived and my entire body hurts and I'm nursing at 2 a.m. Like even if I wasn't dealing with all that stuff, just being a new mom is hard. And then you add all that stuff on top of it and it's just impossible to function or think about yourself. And like, oh, how can I be a better me so I can be a better mother or be a better wife or and like my marriage was falling apart. It just wasn't good. So one of the reasons I wanted to write this book is because I didn't take the right steps that I was supposed to take. It sort of like time moved on. Sammy got older. I slowly came out of it. I wish I had gone to therapy sooner. I wish I had talked about my issues sooner. So mine's sort of like a cautionary tale, like don't do what I did.
Well, that is good to actually understand that. But we've also got to understand that it makes it sound like everything was on your shoulders, and it makes it sound as though no one was helping you. It's hard to help someone when you don't recognize a problem.
That's right.
So were you actually were you digging this down deep inside and trying to give the brave face?
Oh yeah. Qasim wanted to help. He's such a darling of a man, and he wanted to help me, but he'd be like, are you okay? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine.
Right. So part of the problem was you recognizing you had a problem and then giving your hand out to go, help me, which is not what a lot of entrepreneurs are really good at doing.
No, Qasim and I had this really uncomfortable conversation where I was going through a really hard time. I had baby number 2 and I was really struggling. And he gives me this talk about how I need to like have other things in my life outside of the children. And I mean, Ronan was like, he was just months old at the time. And I need to like figure out who I am outside of them and do all these things. And he's giving this like beautiful entrepreneurial speech. And I started to cry and I waited for him to finish. And then I was like, Qasim. And then these 2 words were so hard to say. I go, I'm lonely. And saying those words is really, really hard. I isolated myself. I was having all those feelings I just kept to myself. Now I had 2 babies. It's harder to leave the house. So I just didn't go anywhere. Qasim's being, he's kicking ass in his company. So which means he's working late and I was lonely. And that did not help the situation, but at least saying that out loud, finally, he started coming home early. He started making time for us. He started taking the children and giving me a break. But you have to say that stuff out loud. And it's so hard because it is kind of embarrassing to say I'm lonely.
Now, I wanted you on this show because as entrepreneurs, there is no divide. And you just, and I know Qasim, he's a lovely man, but you get so obsessed with I want to do good for my family.
Right.
Doing good is focusing on the business and
Right.
having the revenue to give you all of the, as you openly put it, the resort style lifestyle. So
Right.
you may be thinking that you're doing good for your family, but the problem may be rooted deeper into it. You recognize that you had that conversation. You declared, I'm lonely. I had you on this show because I want every other person that's an entrepreneur that's maybe got a young family to go, hang on a minute. Am I moving at so much speed that I don't realize the problem is actually not my revenue, my bottom end, my advertising, my Facebook ads? Maybe my problem's a mental health issue, which is not yes, it's a sickness and it's an illness, but it's not a fault. And it's certainly not a weakness.
Right.
You weren't a substandard person because you've got this.
Right.
It was chemical within you that triggered. So what caused you to write the book, and when did you write the book?
So before kids, I was an actor. And my husband and I, our creative pastime together was we used to love writing scripts. Steve, we have so many scripts that are completed, like feature films. I think we have 2 or 3 feature films, and then we've got a bunch of shorts, and we love writing stories. And so I had to stop acting because, you know, you have late night shoots or overnight shoots, and how do you do that with little ones?
Yeah.
So I stopped acting, but I had this creative itch. And since I had started to write with Kasam when we got married, I kind of took back to writing. And whenever I had a struggle, I wrote down stories. So instead of just writing like, oh, today was really hard, I sort of like reenact the day, but then I would change it in the story to be more to my liking. And so that felt, if it was like a massage for my brain, whenever I wrote anything down that felt creative, and I felt like I was, you know, kind of just fulfilling that creative need inside of me. So I was really frustrated simultaneously that nobody was talking about, like other moms were not talking about this issue, because a lot of women have postpartum depression, but a lot of it will be like, oh, I'm going back to work and I feel guilty that I'm leaving my child. My postpartum depression was like, he ruined my life. Take him away from me, please. And you're not allowed to say that out loud. You can't say you don't like your kid. That's just, it's not okay. But that's how I felt. But I wasn't really getting any kind of response whenever I explained that struggle to people. So I just stopped saying it. But I don't really think I'm that special or that unique in that I'm the only woman in the world that felt that way. So I decided to write, you know, use my creative needs to write a story. And it's a memoir of mine in the form of journal entries. So it's really unfiltered. And I just get to say all the shit that I wasn't allowed to say out loud. You know what I mean? So I wrote all that down, and I did most of it during the pandemic while homeschooling 2 little guys. So it was pretty chaotic, but it was it felt really good because it was something that was mine.
So it should give the ladies in the house permission to recognize that, hey, it ain't just you. There's other people out there feeling it here. But what would the guys get out of it?
So I think the guys would get a lot out of it. I think it's really good to understand, because it's in the form of journal entries and it's unfiltered. You get to go inside the minds of the mothers of your wives and be like, oh, that's why she acted that way. Because so many people that I've talked to or that have read the book, like the women will be like, you could take out your name and put in mine, and that's me. And then the men would be like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm talking to my wife right now. You know, so this is something that maybe they don't understand, like why their wife is acting this way. Kasam would like lose me. He'd look at me, but he wouldn't see the person that he knew. She just kind of vanished. And so I think the insight into understanding like what's going on in a woman's head postpartum is really, really insightful, and will probably be good for your relationship, because you realize that like she hasn't changed. She's just struggling.
I think it's magnified because in today's visual economy, we actually have to look better than we are. And we have to look like we've got our shit together. Okay. And you jokingly turned around and, well, you didn't jokingly, you said about, you can't say you don't like your kids.
No, okay? You can't do that. It makes you a bad person.
It makes you a bad person, but there isn't a single parent in the planet that at one time or another doesn't turn around and go, why did I have these selfish kids? Because it is a very low-paid, horrible, unrespected business being a parent.
Yeah.
And it does drag you through the shitter from time to time. It gets in the way of business. It gets in the way of your friendship. It gets in the way of your relationships.
That's right.
But we still carry that. Well, you can't admit it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And you almost challenge single people. So when are you having kids? Because you want them to feel the same pain that you go through.
Suffer with me.
How dare you be so bloody happy? Can guys have this same depression?
So I've talked to a few men who have said that they experienced something similar to depression after their child was born. And obviously they haven't pushed a baby out of their body, so they're not dealing with the same hormones and chemicals, but there is a strange response to just the shift in your household. And you've got 3 kids, so you understand this, especially with your first one. You know, he shows up and then your wife is different, your household is different. You feel the stress of needing to provide, because your wife, if she needed to walk out the door right now and make some money, that's not a problem, but your baby's not going to do that. So now you have this little thing to take care of, and they're relying on you for everything. And so just the stress of that, I think, has like caused a lot of depression in men of like, what's my role here?
Yeah, because we see, and funnily enough, this is just like entrepreneurs. We see the good ones. We see families with kids skipping down the beach and everything being good, and the little girl being cute and the little boy being rough and tumble. We see this postcard perfect world of being a parent. The exact same way we see the postcard perfect, oh, look at him, they can buy any car and they've got the dream house and they're flying their private jet. We don't see the shit.
No.
And as, again, in our visual world, we don't declare it, we don't show it. But in entrepreneurs, we know that, oh, you know, things don't always go right. But isn't it that when you're not a happy parent, you're at fault, and you're a bad parent when you admit things are tough? That has to change. That conversation and narrative has to change, doesn't it?
Why are we acting like we've been doing this since the day we were born? I've never been a mother before. Nope. And every single stage is different. Like, you have a teenage son, right?
Yeah.
You've never had a, you know, and you've never been with him as a teenager before. So every single stage of every single child is new for you. Why should I expect you to know exactly what you're doing? And then, of course, each child is so different. So whatever you learned with Henry, you can't do with George necessarily. So how are you supposed to, and I'm just supposed to expect you to know? I think it's wildly, it's really aggravating that we're just supposed to act like we have it figured out, and women are just supposed to have these instincts that rival Mary Poppins. And I don't have those instincts. I didn't even have the instincts to push my baby. They were like, okay, push. And I was like, I don't know how. And that made me feel really inadequate. And I don't like feeling inadequate. You know, and this is like the one thing I'm like, oh, I was made to do this. I have a uterus. I'm supposed to have children. Oh, but then I didn't know what to do with any of that. And it was hard.
And now I can see, now your book's pretty new. So I'm gonna shout it out again. You can grab it on Amazon. It's called Postpartum Me. It's $14.99 in paperback. My wife actually bought it. I don't like to get free books because, you know, whatever, it's just part of me. I don't like to do that. So we actually purchased the book. Claire's read the book. She's already thrown the book at me and gone, you've got to read this book. On top of reading the book, I think we need to have more of a conversation. Now, you've got a website and it's on here. Suzanne, what is that? Yatim? How do you pronounce that?
Yatim
Aslam. Okay, so it's on here. We're going to put it in the show notes. What should people expect to see when they go to your website?
Our video on this podcast will be put up on this website.
But you'll be able to find out details about the book?
Details about the book, quotes from the book to grab your attention and let you know what the book's about, and just talks, really open, candid talks on motherhood.
All right, that's pretty cool. Little fun fact. You were a beauty queen, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Yes, I was.
What year was that, and what was the title?
Oh my gosh. Well, Steve, you can never remember the title. You've given me so many different titles. Miss Arab USA 2012, coming on 10 years now.
Oh, congratulations. Well, I'm glad to see you didn't peak then. So I'm glad to see you're out badging it around. So the book, Postpartum Me, it's out there. It's on Amazon. I'm glad that you're igniting the conversation we need to have. I'm glad that as a successful, loving, entrepreneurial family that you are, you're actually allowing people to see an ugly side that they need to have the conversations on. So I'm glad to see you came out to the other side. I'm glad that you're using this as a memoir of showing what you didn't do that you could have done, that other people may be able to relate and recognize and be able to go, she missed out on that, but she's now allowing me a roadmap to be able to do something about it. So thank you very much for taking the time to write that book.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate talking to you.
All right, look after yourself, and I'll see you soon.
Ciao.